Florin, you became a pilot. Where was the first time when you thought that becoming a pilot would be cool?
Well, I think I always thought that being a pilot was cool. It was so cool because even I remember when I was a kid, my grandma told me about somebody that she knew, and she said he's a pilot. It's like, oh, like he's like a superhuman,
Mhm.
right? And always there we used to have this saying when I was growing up. It's like it has pilot vision. Like somehow pilots had like the best eyes, among all the humans. So I guess I always loved airplanes since I was a kid, and growing up with my grandparents in the countryside, I used like to spend my summer school breaks there, and twice a week there was an airplane that was flying from Bucharest, the capital, to the bigger city. It was like Tuesday morning, it would fly from Bucharest, and then Thursday or Friday it would fly back. Um, so it was not much excitement otherwise on the countryside among the cows and the sheep. So I was always into airplanes and aviation. And when I got older, I started reading about it. And I was super enthused about all the reading about the planes, about, the Concorde and about Boeing 747. It's like everybody would recognize the Boeing 747, right? Um,
Mhm.
and then one day I was just talking about something that I had just read about some improvements in engine technology at work. And this friend of mine, former coworker, tells me, just drops it during lunch. It's like, I have a plane with what? What do you mean you have an airplane? I always thought somehow I thought that, only Jeff Bezos and the Bill Gateses of the world have airplanes, right? And yeah, so he made it real for me. And then I remember a few days later, he comes by my desk and says, "Hey, do you want to go fly with me tomorrow? I'm taking some puppies from Burnett to, this small airport in Arkansas." So yeah, that was the first time that I sat in a small private airplane. Um, and like I said, he just made it real for me. All of a sudden, I realized, like, whoa, this is possible. And he explained to me how you can do this, like, without being independently wealthy. You can
Mhm.
pool resources with other people. And in his club at the time, there were 13 people who were sharing one airplane. And then a year or two later, they bought a second airplane. So they have two planes in their club. Um,
Mhm.
and so you share the expenses. Obviously, when you divide by 13 people, it's much more um, doable than
Accessible,
owning
yeah.
it by yourself. Um, so yeah, that was the moment when I thought, wow, this could be a thing. Like, well, I could be a pilot.
A few things that stand out to me. So first, I'm from Romania as well, and I know what an event was to see an airplane in the sky. I remember all the kids would gather up like an airplane, an airplane. We would even sing a
We
song,
had the
and it was
rhymes.
an
We had the rhymes.
exciting. Yes, we had the rhymes and everything, and it was an exciting time. It didn't feel like there was a person there flying. It felt so special. But what stands out to me, and I want to point out to people that are listening, that when we are striving a goal, often we feel, if it's a challenging goal, we feel that it's not possible for us. And often the first step that we need to do is just to research. How would I go about accomplishing this specific goal? Because it might be closer than we can even imagine. And then because you had this person, it all of a sudden became possible. What did you do next?
I was lucky enough to have my friend who had been a pilot. I think at the time he had over 1,000 hours, which is a lot. Um,
Hmm.
and I mean, a lot for a private pilot is quite a bit. For a commercial pilot, that who fly for a living, I mean, if you read the news about Sunberger, right, the famous pilot who landed on the Hudson River, and they have like 13,000 hours, 15,000 hours, 8,000 hours.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, the professional pilots have a lot of hours. And my friend, he's a software engineer like me, and at the time he was 1,100 hours, so over 1,000 hours. And so
Hmm.
I was fortunate to have him around, so I could ask him any question and say, he explained to me, oh yeah, there's flight schools that almost everywhere where there's an airport, there's high likelihood that there's a flight school or there's an instructor who can um, teach you how to fly. So I was fortunate to live close enough to Georgetown. It's a municipal airport. So Georgetown is big enough to have enough businesses. Like there's multiple flight schools in Georgetown. So he recommended one. I called him and I said, I'm interested in taking the, private pilot course. And they said, why don't you just come by one day and do a discovery flight? This discovery flights is basically a flight between 45 minutes to an hour. Um, it's you don't have to sign anything. It's like there's no commitment to take the class. So you do the discovery flight. If you like it, you can do the class. If you don't like it, that's fine. And you fly with an instructor, and it feels so good because the instructors are so they make you feel like you did everything, right? It's like, oh, I can't really do this. Like I took off. He explained to me like when you see the speed, here 55 knots, you pull slowly, right? So it's like, well, I took off an airplane all by myself. That's what I thought, at least. I felt like I did everything by myself. So yeah, so I did the discovery flight and I loved it. It's you know you do the downtown tour, what we call it, where you fly a big circle over Austin downtown, and if you get a beautiful day, it never gets old. Like every time
Mhm.
I fly there by myself or with friends, it's just beautiful. I came back and then I said, yes, I want to do the private private pilot class, and I signed up.
What it entailed for you? Like how long it took you? What were the major milestone? Anything that you would be able to tell to someone that hears you for the first time and it becomes the dream becomes a possible reality for them just
Yes.
as listening to this.
So for me, it took a little over a year because I didn't have all the time in the world to dedicate to focus on this, right? So, with the job and with kids and with, bad weather cancellations, or the planes have to go to undergo maintenance and things like that. So the more time you can dedicate to this, the faster it will go. And usually also the cheaper it will be, because it's just like with anything that involves certain motor skills. You need to practice it quite a bit to develop the muscle memory. Let's say if I can only fly once a week, and then for a week or two we get canceled because of weather, then there will be 2, 3, 4 weeks between flights, and of course it's going to be, let's try this maneuver again because I forgot, how did it go. I still have the Excel spreadsheet where I documented everything, the number of hours, the cost. I mean, it's like, obviously there is the airplane rental fees, right? So the airplane must be rented, and they can be, most of the schools will rent the plane including the fuel, and I don't know what the current rates are, 150 $200 an hour or something like that.
Mhm.
Now, a flight hour. So the hours in aviation are a little bit different than the the hours, on the clock. Because if I go to the airport and I pre-check the airplane to make sure that everything's okay and we can fly, and this could take half an hour, and then we go fly for an hour, and then I come back, and then I, you know, wipe off the bugs off the windshield in the airplane, and we put it back, we park it, and we close it down, and let's say that takes another half an hour. So I spend 2 hours on the plane, but you only have to pay for the hour that the airplane was in the air. The
Mm.
plane, yes, the plane has
Mhm.
um, a timer
A counter.
where that
Mhm.
that counts the hours. It's called the hops, um, and basically, unless the plane is in the air, the engine running, only that counts as time that you have to pay for. But then there is the instructor time, obviously, right? All the time that the instructor is with you. So for the instructor, you will have to pay the 2 hours.
Mhm.
Right? That
Mhm.
includes the preparation and clean up and parking afterwards. And then um, there are certain milestones, like you said, that have to be um, achieved. The FAA requires 40 hours minimum of flight hours before you can even sign up to take the exam. So um, for the private pilot license, it works a little bit like the driver's license. You have a written exam. I don't remember exactly because I didn't take my driver's license in Texas. I had an out of state Texas license, and I just got the Texas one, so I don't know exactly what the requirements are. But some states have a minimum requirement of number of hours that you have to take, driving school or something, and then you have the exam, the written exam, and then practical exam. And for a private pilot, it's similar. The FAA requires 40 hours. Now that would have to be somebody who's very good and does everything, and the average is a little bit higher. So I was around 75 hours when I was ready to take my exams and the test, and that's I think that's closer to the US average. And then basically there you fly with an instructor until the instructor says, okay, I trust you enough to fly by yourself. And that's like a big milestone. That's called the first solo.
Mm-hmm.
And the first solo is basically, for the first time I'm by myself in the airplane. Like, can I really do this? Can I
While
really
you're
land
still a student,
as a student?
like
Yes.
before even taking the exam, so you
Yes.
can fly. Wow.
Yes, absolutely. I would say that a lot of the hours in the school are by yourself. I don't remember from the top of my head what the requirement is, but there is also, out of those 40 hours, there's a certain number of hours required to fly solo. And not only that, but one of the requirements is you have to fly solo far enough from your home base. Like, it has to be a cross-country solo, so it has to be farther than 50 miles. You have to go from your home base to another airport that's at least 50 miles from your home base, and then to another place, and then come back. That's one of the milestones. That's one of the requirements for the private pilot license that you have to do before you even sign up to take the check ride. So the check ride, when the examiner, when you meet with the examiner to take the final the exam, there's a long checklist. Okay, let's see. Have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done this? Da, da, da. And then when all the conditions are met, then you can take. But usually, you would never schedule a check ride without you knowing that you have all those requirements, right?
What a moment to arrive at the point where another human trusts you to let you fly by yourself. I can only imagine that moment, because it's one thing to feel like, hey, I know it, I trust myself, I've done it I don't know how many times, but I've done it, and I can trust myself. But it's another thing for somebody next to you to say, yeah, I think I can trust you, like for you to instill that trust in them. How many hours would you say it took you until you were allowed to fly solo?
Oh, that's good. I would have to look at my logbooks. I mean, I should have probably looked and
Or
looked it up.
just
But
a ballpark, like
ballpark, I would say 20 hours or something like that. Between 20 and 30 hours or something. Because like I said, I didn't have time to fly every day. So usually, like I said, the more time you can dedicate, the faster you are able to achieve the milestones. But I clearly remember the day when this happened. I clearly remember it because it's a huge milestone, right? So for me, first of all, one of the things when I was learning all of it, right? So I'll tell you, I remember this particular thing. So this one thing in particular, driving back from Georgetown to where I live here, it's about 25. It's a 25-minute ride, and I don't think I've ever done any sort of activity that is so mentally taxing. It was basically, there's so many things that you have to do constantly, and the instructors next to you say, okay, watch your airspeed, flaps, constant, like RPM, full reach, a million things that you have to think about constantly, right? And you can't just pull over and take a break, take a breather, right? You don't have that option. So I was so mentally drained in the beginning that I couldn't even have the radio on because it was too much for me to drive the car and have music or something. No, and I would drive the 25 minutes in complete silence because it was like Oh, it was too much for me. And in the beginning, I thought that talking to ATC, talking to the control tower, was harder than flying the airplane. Right? It's like
Mm.
it was this like strange coded language that ATC talks. I thought it was the hardest thing, and I like for me that was a even big, I felt that it was an even bigger milestone than being able to land the plane by myself. Just being able to figure out how to talk to the ATC, because I just it feels like the ATC people are just they are so competent and so good, and they know exactly what, and you don't want to be I don't want to be that guy who screws something up or doesn't know, and like, what. No, I don't. I want to be like them. I want to be good. And many times when I fly around here, I dial into the frequency of Austin Approach Airport with 119.0, and then I just listen to the professionals talk. I just listen to the Southwest American Airlines Delta and all these talking to Austin Tower, and it's just so amazing. And I learned so many things. And sometimes whenever I fly over downtown, and I'm in the control space of Austin Airport, and then I have to talk to the tower too, and I can tell you there is no better feeling than just kind of feeling that I'm rubbing shoulders with the professionals, right? Like with those pilots that have thousands of hours, I'm on the same radio frequency like them, and they hear my voice when I talk to ATC, and sometimes when I'll fly to the beach to Port Aransas sometimes, and then going there and coming back, I also go to the airspace, Los Angeles, or I'm close. I'm not necessarily going into the airspace, but I always like to talk to the tower because there's traffic, there's airplanes landing in, and da da da. And then I will be on the frequency and listen and hear the Austin traffic control say, American 223. There is a Cherokee, 3 miles in front of you at 5,000 feet. And then I know they're talking about me, like they're telling them that this is me flying in front of them. And I hear them, we're looking for that traffic. And then the tower will say, oh, that traffic is to your right. There's no concern. It's like, wow, this is awesome. it's just, for me, and I don't know, it feels so cool to be part of this world.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning that code to talk in ATC slang was for me, I thought, I don't think if I'll ever be able to. What do I
Mm-hmm.
say? What are the words?
What supported you? Because I want to go more into the challenges that you had, but since we're talking about this particular thing, talking with the tower control, what was something that supported you? One thing that I caught is listening to what the other pilots are saying. What else helped you to be able to be competent to talk to them?
So,
Because
so,
it's a
so obviously
serious thing.
yeah. So obviously the flight school is a great resource, right? All the instructors there, and even if you, and I, most of my flights were with the same instructor, but then every now and then, because of scheduling issues, or I flew with other instructors as well. And in my experience, all of them were great resources, and being able to answer questions and everything. Obviously, YouTube is a tremendous resource, and then there are FAA publications. There are manuals that can teach you how to speak. It's like, how do you say it when you taxi this way and you want to get this kind of permission, and da, da, da. So it's plenty of resources right there. Just have to look for them, and if you're motivated and dedicated, this
No lack
place.
of information these days is just lack of putting it to practice.
Oh yes.
So
Oh, I
Florin,
remember one of the things that I did on my first cross country solo. First cross country solo, right? So I get signed off. So basically, as a student, you still have some restrictions, right? Even though, so the first milestone, like I said, is the first solo. So the first time the instructor steps out of the plane and says, okay, Florin, now you go by yourself. Good luck, okay? Just do the things we've been doing and you'll be okay. So I flew by myself, and I remember the first landing was so good that I was so happy. I was like screaming with happiness inside, and I forgot to raise the flaps after. So you come into with full flaps, so that your plane is slower, and literally I touch down, and after you touch down, you continue, and you push the gas again and continue. It's called a touch and go. And I was just so happy that I didn't mess up the first landing. And messing up, I don't mean crash or anything, but like usually bouncing, like
Mm-hmm,
going like
mm-hmm.
that, it's not good. Or landing a little bit too hard. Um, so I was so happy that my landing was good and smooth that I forgot to raise the flaps. So I basically was airborne much faster than I had expected, because with the flaps, that's what the flaps do. They increase the lift, and you know, and I remember it's like, oops, okay, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't be overly excited, and I should focus and pay attention to the task at hand. Um, but since I did all my training in Georgetown, at the Georgetown Airport, I was very familiar with the procedures and the how should I say, the typical procedures
Protocols.
at
Mhm.
Georgetown. And then there comes my first cross country solo, right? So I pick another airport, and I think I picked Waco. Waco, very nice airport, right next to a lake. You come into land over the water; it's beautiful. So I didn't have to stop. So as I approached Waco and I got in contact with Echo Control Tower, I asked for the typical touch and go, right? I'm requesting permission to do a touch and go on your airport, and they replied, here for the option. What is the option? I've never asked or received the option at Georgetown. We had asked for either touch and go or full stop. So it was so new for me. I was like, for a moment, I was baffled. Like, what is it? What's the option? And I didn't have anybody like instruct when the instructor was not next to me to tell me, what this option was. So basically, the option is where you can do whatever you want. So you ask, like I'm asking for a touch and go, and they give me the option. I mean, that which means if you want to do touch and go, fine. If you want to stop, it's fine. So if you want to
Mhm,
stop and
mhm.
go, for instance, that's also fine. Like these runways are long enough for these small airplanes that you can just stop in the middle of it, or come to a full stop, and then continue and take off.
Mhm.
But I didn't know. So anyway, I did my touch and go, and I left, and I came back home and asked myself, what is the option? And it's like, oh yeah, the option is when you do whatever you want.
Looking just in that year of starting the school, getting your license, what would you say was the most challenging thing?
The most challenging thing was definitely the check ride itself. I would say over the entire course, you learn a lot of things, a lot of maneuvers, a lot of theoretical things. Like I said, all the radio language and everything. And then but usually you learn one skill, and then you do a few flights and you practice that one maneuver, and then okay, then in a few weeks you do another maneuver and you practice that thing, and you da, 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 da. Now when you do the check ride, which is the actual test, the practical test with the examiner, it's everything you know, everything you've learned in those 2-3 hours um, of flying. So that's probably the biggest challenge, because you have to do all the maneuvers, everything you've learned, um, and yeah, you have to do them all right, more or less. And there are certain things that if they are imperfect, you can redo it during the same examination. But there are certain things, for instance, if the examiner at any point in time has to take over the controls, that's an automatic failure, just like with the driver's license, right? If the student doesn't stop at the stop sign and the examiner has to push the brakes, it's over. See you another time, right? So there are similar situations with the check ride. But I would say that yes, the check ride is probably was the biggest challenge um, in this whole process, having to do everything you've learned in in that half a day, right?
What was something that helped you summarize, remember all the hours? Because I think you mentioned about 75 hours until you took that exam. Like what helped you remember being able to perform in that moment?
Um, I think there are things that my instructor was really really um, drilling into my head. So I remember, for instance, emergency maneuvers like engine failure, right? That's obviously the biggest.
Mhm.
Well, I'm probably not the biggest. Well, I guess uh, engine failure and fire in the cabin,
Mm.
cabin power engine fire. The that are like the worst nightmares for a pilot, especially of single engine airplane. Because if you have a double engine, or in the case of a Boeing 747 with four engines, if one engine breaks down, I don't think they even
Mhm.
sweat.
Mhm.
Um, but I remember almost every flight we flew, we practiced the engine failure maneuver, right? Engine out. Um,
Mhm.
so she would pull the power all the way, and so the engine would slow down to idle. It's like, oh, engine failed. What do you do?
Mhm.
Every flight. Um,
So having a
yes,
good
yes.
instructor
Having
that
a good
really knows
instructor
what.
and drilling into the student's head the things that are very important, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And then I remember there are certain things that always stay ahead of the airplane, which means plan ahead. Like don't wait until the last minute to ask for clearance or it's like always be a step ahead of time so you don't get overwhelmed.
You've done something that you didn't even thought it's possible for you. Now
Yes.
you got it. Now you are a pilot. So tell me, what are some things, Florin, that you learned about yourself in this journey?
I learned that if you want something bad enough and you're willing to put the effort and dedication, it can happen. You can make it happen.
For someone that wants to become a pilot, what would you tell them if you were to mentor them?
I would encourage them, right? It's like absolutely, it's doable. It can be done. Yes, it's not cheap. And I remember my friend, the same friend that basically uh, helped me go to that last step that when it made it real for me, right? The day I got my private license, the day I passed my check ride, he was the first one. I texted him. I was like, "Oh, I got my check right. Look, picture." So it's like everybody does the same thing. They take a picture with the examiner, with the certificate, with the temporary license in their hand, shaking hands, and posts on Facebook. So I sent it to my friend, and I said, "Look, Shane, I got my pilot license." And his reply was, "Oh, congratulations! You will never have money ever again from now on." So that's true. That is true. Right? It's not a cheap hobby, but it can be done. I currently have a share in a Piper Cherokee airplane, share with four other people, great people, and we get along very well. There's plenty of time for all of us to fly the airplane. Almost everybody can do it.
I have a tradition on this podcast where I ask the current guest about a book that was foundational for them, and it doesn't have to be on the topic of that we are discussing. What is a book that you tend to recommend, like a good read? And that's the book I'm going to send to the next guest.
Growing up in Romania, it's a huge part of who I am. And I lived in Germany for almost 5 years before moving to the US. And one of the big questions was always for me, why do different countries evolve so differently? Right? Like basically it boils down to why are some countries poor and some other countries rich?
Mm-hmm.
It's like what did we do
Mm-hmm.
wrong? Or what did they do
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was obsessed with this question for a long, long time. And a number of years ago, I read this book. The name of the book is called Why Nations Fail. Um, for me, that book would provide the best answers to that question that I had. I found that book fascinating in explaining the differences. It's like why, even when you control for all the variables, right? It's like same people, same language, same religion, and this group does much better than that group, and why is that? So yeah, I wholeheartedly recommend Why Nations Fail.
Wonderful. Thank you, Florin, for taking the time to share this journey. And I really hope that it can help a pilot out there that is waiting, questioning, to take the first step and to start on this journey to become part of this rather small group that has the courage and the drive to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I love talking about this. I love aviation, and I'm very enthusiastic about it. I love talking about it. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my enthusiasm.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you. I hope this episode gave you some inspiration for reaching your goals. If you found it useful, please hit the subscribe button. This will help me bring you more inspirational stories to support your own journey to point B. Thank you.